Welcome to the Excel Intermediate course. In this video, I'll be talking about advanced Excel features like charts, pivot tables, formulas, and the top 20 keyboard shortcuts. And I promise, by the end of this video, you will transform from a beginner to an intermediate user. So let's dive in. I want to show you how you can create an interactive dashboard in Microsoft Excel. With a dashboard, you can showcase the most important information to your organization. And best of all, it's easy to set up. As you can see, I don't have anything in this workbook yet. But luckily, I have data to build my dashboard. Down below, let's click on the data worksheet. On the data sheet, here you will see sales data by the market for the Achieve More Donut Company. To build our dashboard, we will create a few pivot tables. The table that you see here is currently in a tabular format, and this works really well for creating pivot tables. If you are new to pivot tables, I have included an overview video in the description of how to create a pivot table, and I am gonna publish more advanced pivot table tutorial in the future, so stay tuned for that. As a first step, we need to make sure that our data here is in a table format. To turn it into a table, simply click anywhere in your data and then go up to the top ribbon and click on Insert. Right here you have the option to turn it into a table. You can also press the shortcut key Ctrl plus T. Let's click on this. In this prompt, it asks me where my data is. And here it automatically identifies all of the different data that I want to bring into this table. Here it also asks me if my table has headers, and this is my header right up here. It does. So I'll make sure that I check this box. Next, let's click on OK. All of my data is now included into a table, and it has this nice table formatting. Next, I want to insert a pivot table. So once again, I'll click into my table, and then up on the top ribbon, let's click on Insert, and over on the left hand side, there's the option to insert a pivot table. When you click on that, that opens up a prompt and it asks us what table or range we want to use. I'll simply select this table. This is the table that I just created. I'll place my pivot table on a new worksheet, and then I'll click on OK. This now drops me into a new worksheet, and I can now start building my pivot tables. For my dashboard, I want to have three different charts. So I'm going to need three different pivot tables, and right now I only have one. If I go down below over to all of my different sheets, I can press the Control key, click on sheet 1, and then drag it over. This will create another pivot table. It's just a copy of sheet 1. Here I'll press the Control key again, click on this sheet, drag it over, and now I have three different pivot tables. And I'll use these three different sheets to pull together all of my views for my dashboard. The first view I want to pull together is profit by country and the product. Here I'll right click on this tab, I'll select rename, and let me call this just what it is, profit by country and the product. Now that I have renamed this sheet, I am ready to pull together my first pivot table, and once again I want to know profit by country and the product. Over on the right hand side, I have all of my different pivot table fields. First, I'll select country and I'll pull that down into rows. Here we can see all of the different countries that we operate in for the Achieve More Donut Company. Also over on the right hand side, I see a field called product. Here I'll drag that down to columns, and here you can see all of the different donuts that we make here. And trust me, they are all extremely delicious. Okay, over here I'll select profit, bring it down into values, and here I can see all of our different countries, all of the donor types and the associated profit. Now that my pivot table is all done, I'm ready to insert a chart, and we are going to use this chart on our dashboard. To insert a chart, let's go to the top tabs and click on Pivot Table Analyze. Over on the right hand side, there's the option to insert a pivot chart. Let's click on that. This opens up the Insert Chart dialog. And right here, I'm going to select the stacked column chart. Next, let's click on OK. And here now you can see a pivot chart representing all of this data. Now when we did this sorting here, you will see all of the different markets are sorted from the largest over on the left down to the smallest on the right. Also with this stacked bar chart, here you will notice that the largest items are at the bottom and the smallest items are at the top. So it makes it easier to consume the data. Overall, this looks pretty good, but I think I need a title on this chart just so when people look at it, they can understand what it is. Let's go up to the top tabs, click on Design, and over on the right hand side, click on Add Chart Elements. Right here we will go down to the chart title and I'll add it above the chart. For the chart title, I will simply describe what it is. It's profit by market and the product type. Before I bring this chart back to my dashboard, I want to clean up a more few things. Here I have all of these different fields, item including on my chart. Here if I click on this, I can filter my product, but I don't want this cluttering up on my chart. So I could right click on the item and I'll select to remove or hide all field buttons on this chart, and when I select that, it really helps clean it up. I'm now ready to move this chart to my dashboard. Here I'll select the chart. I'll press Ctrl plus C. Next I'll click over to my dashboard and I'll paste it into the sheet. And check that out. I now have my first visual on my dashboard. Here I'll zoom out just a little bit so I can see how it sits on my dashboard. Here I can select the chart item, and if I right click on it and then drag it, it will snap into different positions. So this way I can organize my dashboard a little bit more easily. Here I'll position this first item right here and I'll extend it down just a little bit, maybe right down to this point. I think that looks pretty good. Next, I want to create two more pivot tables for my dashboard, and I'll do this a little bit more quickly. Down below, I'll click on the next sheet, and here I'll rename this. And we will call this quantity sold each month. To track items sold each month, here I'll select the date and I'll make this my row. And right up here, I'll select quantity sold as the values. So here I could see by month how many items we sold. To help with the formatting, here I'll highlight all of the numbers and I'll insert the comma style. And I'll also remove the decimal points just like we did before. I'll click on pivot table analyze and here I'll insert a pivot chart. For sales over time, I think a line chart will work really well. I'll select this one and then click on OK. This now insert my chart and here I'll update the title to say units sold each month. Here I'll remove the legend and I want to remove the fields just like I did before. I'll right click and I'll hide all field buttons on the chart. This now looks really good. So I'll copy it and I'll bring it into my dashboard. In my dashboard, I'll press Ctrl plus V to paste and here I'll position it right near the top and here I'll reduce the size just a little bit like this. That looks pretty good. Lastly, I want to create one more pivot table for my dashboard. I'll go down to the bottom tabs and let me rename this one to profit by month. To create a pivot table with profit by month, it's going to be very similar to the last pivot table that we just created. I'll select months and I'll drag it down into rows. Next, I'll select profit and I'll pull it down into values. And here we see our profit by month. Next, I want to set it so it appears as a currency and I'll highlight all of these values and here I'll select the currency view. Also, I'll remove the decimal places. Next, I want to insert a chart. So once again, I'll click on the tab titled Pivot Table Analyze and right here I'll select a pivot chart. To represent data over time, line chart works really well. And I don't know why profit decreased in August this much. Well, that's another thing. Right up here, I'll click on the title of the chart and I'll put in profit by month. I want to remove all of the different fields. I think that will make the dashboard look better. Once again, I'll right click and select hide all the field buttons on the chart. Next, I want to bring this chart over to my dashboard. So once again, I'll select this chart, press Ctrl plus V to copy and then I'll click into my dashboard. Here within the dashboard, I'll press Ctrl plus V to paste it here. I'll position it under items sold each month and I'll make my best attempt at trying to make it just about the same size. Now just like we did before, I can drag this and then this item will snap to the cells on the page. Here I'll do the same down here and now everything lines up really nicely. So far we have constructed a static dashboard, but now I want to enhance its functionality by making it dynamic. To achieve this, let's start by selecting one of the items and then navigating to the Pivot Chart Analyze tab. Within this tab, we have the option to insert slicers and timeline. Let's begin by inserting a timeline. After selecting a date, we will click OK, which will insert a timeline slicer. We can then adjust its dimensions and position it alongside other items on the dashboard. Now let's insert additional slicer by selecting a pivot table, going to Pivot Chart Analyze, and choosing Insert Slicer. We will select both country and product within the dialog box to enable quick filtering by these parameters. Once the slicer are inserted, we can clean them up by removing unnecessary headers and adjusting their size for a cleaner appearance. I'll right click on the slicer and will go to the slicer setting and click here on the display header. I'll uncheck this and press OK, and I'll do the same for the product. Alright, now I can resize these slicers and position the slicer here on the left hand side and set their dimensions. With the slicer in place, we can now easily filter the data on our dashboard. For example, if we only want to view data for India, we can select India from the slicer, and the corresponding pivot table will update accordingly. However, we need to ensure that these slicers are connected to all of the pivot table on the dashboard. By right-clicking on the slicer, I'll access Report Connection and select all relevant pivot tables. We ensure that changes made in one slicer are reflected across all pivot tables. I'll do the same for the other two slicers as well, and check this out. When I click on my slicer now, it updates all of my different pivot table over on the side. So this dashboard is definitely becoming a lot more interactive now. This dashboard is working really well. But what if new data comes in and we want to make sure that our dashboard reflects it? Well, it's very easy to take care of. Down below, let's click into the new data tab. And here you will see that we have additional data for 2022. And it's formatted in exactly the same format. Here let's select all the data from this table and then press Ctrl plus C. Once you copy all of the data, let's click into the data sheet. Go all the way to the bottom of the table. This is the table that we use to construct all of our pivot table, and here simply paste it all of the new data. Because we turned this into a table, it automatically incorporates this new data into that same table. Next, on the bottom, let's click back into our dashboard. We want to make sure that the dashboard now reflects all of the latest data. To do that, let's click on one of these pivot charts and then go up to pivot chart analysis. Within the ribbon here, there's the option to refresh. Let's click on this and then select refresh all. And there you will see that your dashboard automatically takes all of the latest data into account. This dashboard now is starting to look pretty nice, but it still has the look and feel of Excel. I want it to look more like a proper dashboard. To do that, let's go up to the View tab up on top, and with the sheets selected right here, you have the option to turn off the grid lines. There you don't have those typical cells in Excel. Also, here I can turn off the headings, so now it's really starting to feel more like a dashboard. This dashboard is now starting to look really nice, but maybe the color scheme doesn't match your organization. Well, that's not a problem. We can also change that. Up on top with the top tabs, click on the one titled Page Layout. And over on the left hand side, you can choose from all of these different themes, and that will apply it to your dashboard. If you find yourself in front of a computer looking at spreadsheets often, these 20 must-know Excel shortcuts will hopefully save you hours of time. Alright, so here's the Excel file that we will be working with. Let's get started with number 20. As you can see over here in the table, we have all of this data down below, which when you start to scroll down, you can actually no longer see the header. So we are not quite sure what this is referring to, and the same thing with all of these other ones. What we can do here instead is actually just do a shortcut, which is going to freeze that top row. Now to do so, you are gonna press Alt plus WFR. And now when we start to scroll down, you will notice that the top line is frozen, which makes things a lot easier for us. If you ever want to remove that, you can always go over here under Freeze Pans. In the View option, just click on it. And from here, hit Unfreeze Pans, and that's going to remove that for us. Next up at number 19, we have the control arrow here. So as you can see over here, to navigate across the data set, because it's very long, you can actually press the shortcut control and then just use the arrows. So control plus down arrow to get all the way down to the bottom, control plus up arrow and right and left to go to the sides. Similarly, you can do control plus shift plus down arrow and control plus shift plus right. That basically allow you to select certain areas. If you only want to select column B and C, just stop pressing the control and just go shift plus right arrow, and you can see that allow you to do that. Let's go up back to the top of the dataset to look at number 18. So control plus up arrow to the top, and over here you can see that we have got total sales. And let's say we want to continue this. Now to do so, you can just press Ctrl plus R. That's basically going to copy what you had toward the left, and similarly you can go to the Ctrl plus D. That is going to drag everything that you had above down one, going back down toward the bottom. So Ctrl plus down arrow. Let's suppose over here that we want to add some new rows. So instead of actually going ahead and typing everything in again, what you can do is hit the Alt plus down arrow. That's going to show you the drop down or down arrow of all of the things that you already had above. So it's somewhat faster for you to just paste it in there. At number 16, we have to select a row or a column. Now to do so, all you need to do is hover over a specific area and go to Shift plus space. And similarly for the column, it's just going to be Control plus space. Now that one on its own just isn't very useful. So that's when the next trick comes in, and combined it can be quite handy. So again we will do the shift plus space, and now if we want to add the row, you just need to go to control plus shift plus plus sign, again control and shift plus, and to remove some you have to go to control minus and shift minus. Similarly for column, you can go control space and then control shift plus and control minus. So what if we just want to move a specific row up a bit? Now to do so, we will go to shift space again, and instead of having to add new rows etc, we can just press the shift key, and when you hover over the area you will see that cursor changes to these arrows, and from there you just want to click and drag it. Let's say we drag it up here, and you can see how that's moved it all up. Similarly, we can take it back down. So shift and then just drag it down over here. To undo that, we are just gonna press Ctrl plus Z and Ctrl plus Z again. Now let's go all the way back up. So Ctrl plus up arrows, and you can see that sold items here. Let's say that we want it's a bit too long, and so we want to space it out a bit, maybe put it into a different line. Now to do so, we are just gonna get inside of it over here, and what we are gonna press is Alt and enter, and hit enter again. And now you can see how it spaced it out across two lines, but it still stayed within the same cell. Coming in at number 12, we have got adding comments. So let's suppose that the new intern worked on this file, but we don't really trust her, so we just want to make sure that this number does make sense. Now one way to let her know is to go hover over the cell you are not sure about and just hit the shift plus F2. Now you can see that this pop-up is going to show up with your name, and then over here we can write what you want. Let's say, can you check this? Now you can see that it's left this red sign, which when you hover over, it's going to show you actual comment. As we have seen here, this dataset is not so small. So suppose we want to reach row 100. We can hover over there, which might be a bit tedious, but the shortcut there is just clicking the Control G. That's going to show you the go to pop-up. So within this pop-up, the reference that we want is we want to go to the row 100, right? So we are just going to put a and 100. That's going to take us to that specific cell. So we will hit OK there, and you will notice that it's taken us exactly right there. Great, that's the first part done. And now let's get into the top 10. So we will just go to the next sheet, and here you can see that we have got the salesperson alongside some missing data from the first name and the last name. Now to fill this in, we can go one by one. Here for the first name and the last name. Now to fill this in, we can go one by one. So write Ryan there and then Robert and so on. Or you can use the shortcut, and here's the shortcut. You just write the first name here and then press Ctrl E. And then you can see that it's going to fill all of these in just a second. The same thing goes with the last name. Write Ellie and again press Ctrl E. If we look over to this side where it says total sales here, let's say that we want to find out the total of that. Now to do that, let's just go up toward the bottom here, and all we need to do is set the alt equals, that's going to sum up all of these total, and just hit enter just like that, and there we got the total. Next up, the number 8. Suppose we want to copy the total amount and paste it somewhere else. So we will go to control up here, and all we are gonna do is control space, and that's going to copy that whole column for us. And then we will go control C. Let's say we want to paste it over here under column M and control V, but the problem is that it goes all to zero, and that's because it was actually a formula. So beforehand it was actually calculating the total sales, which was the price and the item sold, but now because it's not referencing that anymore, it no longer works. So instead that we are gonna copy it again. So go to control space and then control C, and this time instead of just control V, we are going to press control alt V, and you can see that this is going to show this paste special dialog box, and within this you can just paste the formula, the formats, etc. In our case we want to paste the values. That's what is going to give us the actual number, so we will just click on that and hit OK. And now you can see that it's pasted at the values, and if we look inside of them, they no longer have the formula either. Okay, let's move on to number 7. We have got formatting shortcuts now. So suppose over here that we want to change this from a dollar sign to, let's say, euro. And within this we want to go under currencies and we want to change this to a euro sign. So this one is the one that works for us, and let's say we also want to add one decimal place, and basically that would do it for us. But as you can see, within format cells you can also change a lot of other things like the font, the fill, etc. And here we can go for an orange fill as well to identify the euro sign. Hit OK. Now you can see that it's all reformatted. And now if you want to replicate this step, and what you can do is actually press the F4 key, which is another shortcut, which is basically going to replicate the previous step. So it's going to keep the same, the number that was there originally, but it's just going to change the formatting. All right, now moving into the top 5, and over here let's just go back to this side of the dataset. And within the country name, here you will notice that Canada has a typo where it's got two A's. Now to get rid of that, instead of going one by one, which could be quite tedious, especially if you have a long set of data, you just gotta go to Control H, which is the replace feature. Define and replace. So we want to find the texture with two A's, so Canada there with the two A's, and we want to replace that with a regular Canada as it should be spelled. Then from here we are just gonna go to replace all, and it's just gonna say okay, we made replacements, hit OK there, and we are gonna close out that. Now that we have fixed that, let's say that we just want to filter by Canada. So instead of going ahead and having to apply a full filter, all we need to do is just right click on Canada, go under filter there, and we want to filter by the selected cell value. So just click on that, and here you can see that we have all of the Canada country details that's been filtered. Let's just remove the filter for now. Another great way to filter is using slicers. Now to do so, first we are going to convert this into a table. So go to Control T, and then it's going to select the data set, and then it's going to select the data set, make sure it's all correct, and hit OK. Now from here we are gonna do is under table design, we are gonna go to insert slicer. So just click on that. Then we want a slicer specifically for the country. This is going to allow us to select different countries, so hit OK there. And if we want to select Canada again, all we need to do is click on Canada, and that's going to filter it for us. Same thing goes with any other country. Similarly, if you want to select more than one, you have got to go to the stick sign here, but this doesn't make sense in my dataset because I only have two countries. Okay, so in number 2 we have a common issue that people encounter. Let's suppose that we want to find out the top 3 sold items. So we will just type that here, the top 3 items sold, and so for the top one, it's simply going to be the max function, which is going to take the highest one, right? So we are just going to go is equal to max, hit the top key, and we are going to select all of these here and hit enter, and there you go. But for the second and third one, we can no longer use the max function. So instead, there comes what's known as the large function. We can write is equal to large and select this data, put a comma, and we want the second highest, so we have to write here 2. Close those brackets and hit enter. And for the third one, we are just gonna copy the cell down, and then within it, we just have to change the number from 2 to 3. Just like that, we have the top 3. And finally, as the number 1, Let's suppose that it was our new intern that sent us this file and we doubt her. So we just want to make sure that the all formulas just make sense. Now to do so, what we can do is actually hit the control key and this accent key of sorts. It's basically going to allow us to see all of the formula and where they are going. Okay, alright, so that was the top 20 Excel shortcuts. So why do we use pivot tables in MS Excel? It's simple. If you want to get insight from your data or create reports really fast, you will need pivot tables. Let's say you receive this data set. You need to figure out the total sales by product and get them in order so you can see which product generate the most sales. You also want to figure out which customer account for the highest percentage of total sales. We can get this done faster than it takes to make a cup of coffee. Let's get started. In this example, we have sales data by product, customer, and company. Now, the first thing you need to do before you insert a pivot table is to make sure that your data is organized in a proper format. This means it should be in a tabular data format like you see here. Each column has a header. You shouldn't have empty columns in the middle, and you also should not have empty rows in the middle of your dataset. And I think you shouldn't have all total values in the middle of this dataset. Once you are positive with these points, you are now ready to insert your pivot table. To do that, you can go to Insert and select Pivot Table from here. And check this out. The range here is hard coding it to cell A1 to H48. This is until where I have my data. If I add more lines to this data, they will not be added in my report. I will have to update my range, but I would rather avoid this step. So what I need to do before I can insert a pivot table to turn my data set into an official Excel table. This has the added advantage that whenever I get my new data, my pivot table will automatically reflect that the moment I press refresh. All I have to do is to click on this button here that's called table or use the shortcut key Ctrl plus T. Excel asks you that if your table has header, you can click OK and now a table is inserted in my data. Now what I also prefer to do is to give my table a name so that I can recognize it later. You can do it from this table name box here. Now that we have a table, we can automatically summarize with the pivot table or go back to insert and click on pivot table. Check what happens now. We get the name of our table. As our table expands with new data, they will automatically be included in our pivot table. But before I do this, I want to show you even an easier way, and that is to click on recommended pivot tables. These are actually quite smart. They might just give you an exactly what you are looking for, or they might help you get a faster start. So for example, here I have the sum of sales by customer name. One of the report I want to create has sales in it. So I'm going to go with that. Just select it and click on OK and you get your pivot table inserted on a new sheet. This is the result of my table. It does all the selecting stuff for me. I didn't have to write a single formula to do this. Now, what you see here are all the headers of your dataset. That's why each column needs to have a header. What Excel went ahead and did when you inserted your pivot table is that it puts the sale in the value section and the customer name in the raw section. Now, if for some reason you don't want to see the sum of sales, but instead you would rather see something else, for example the average, you can click on this drop down, go to value field settings and change your selection from here. So I go with average and press OK. Now you can also change that from here. Right click is your best friend in a pivot table. If I right click, I can also select value field setting from here. I'm going to put this to sum and click OK. Okay, another thing you can get to with a right click is the number format. So let's say I want to add 1000 separators to my number here. I can select number format. So don't select format cells because that just format the underlying cell. Number format stay with your pivot table as it expands. So I'm going to go with number, use 1000 separator and 0 decimal places. Now you can adjust and update this pivot table as you need to do it. So for example, if I wanted to look at the different country, I could decide to add the country in the filter and then when I click on this drop down, I can select a specific country or I can activate multi-select, which in this case doesn't make sense because I just have two items. and you can also leave it on all. Now, if you decide that you don't want to have country in the filter, you can bring it to the column section. And now we have customer name by country here. We also automatically get the grand total on this side. Now, if you have another level, let's say we are going to bring product code to the rows here, we also get subtotals. Okay, so now let's talk about designing your pivot table. So for example, under grand total, you might decide to deactivate it for either to rows or to columns or for everything if you don't want to see it at all. So if I go with off, it completely remove my grand totals. If I just activate it for columns only, I get the grand total on the bottom here. You might also want to do the same thing for subtotals. If I select do not show subtotals, it's going to remove them from here. Now let's talk about the layout of your report. The layout that I prefer is to show in a tabular form. This gives me the column header for each of the field here. Now another thing you might want to do is to fill in the gaps here. Under report layout, you could select repeat all item labels and that repeat everything and fill in the gaps. But I'm just going to remove that. And now let's take a look at the button here. So you can collapse field or expand fields. If you want to take away this ability, you can go to pivot table analyze and here in the show group, click on this button and it takes away the button. If you click again, it brings them back. Okay, so now let's see the field list. This one here. If for some reason you close that and you want to get it back, you can do that by going back to show and selecting the field list from here. Now I'm just going to put everything back to the way I had. So I don't want country. Whenever you don't want anything, you can just kick it out, just drag and drop it here somewhere in the fields list. I also don't want the product code. So I just want customer name by sales. One other thing you might want to do is to update the header here. So I don't want anyone to see sum of sales. Let's say I just want them to see sales. When I press enter, you can see that Excel doesn't like it. Excel doesn't like it if a header here is identical to a field name here. So if you want it to be identical, what you need to do is either add a space after the name or before the name, or you can completely change the name. Also for grand total, I can just call this total. Alright, so let's also update the design of this pivot table by selecting a different style. So you have a lot of options here and you can also create your pivot table style if you would like. One thing I would like to do here is to sort this. So just right click, sort and largest to smallest. Now if you noticed that the pivot table column collapse, there is the option for this. You can actually remove autofit if you don't want this to happen. So right click, go to pivot table options. On the bottom here you have the autofit column with an update. Let's take away that check mark and click OK. One thing that my manager asked me to that was to get the sale percentage by customer as compared with the total. And let's say I also want to see the complete sale value here. Well, what I can do here is I can bring in sale second time into my value field. And now check this out. I'm going to right click, show value as and select percentage of grand total. But you can check out all the other options that you have. If you get a chance, go ahead and try these because they can come in handy when you are creating reports. Now I am going to call this sales percentage. Okay, so our report is now done. So this was how easy it is to create pivot table in Excel. That was a quick introduction to pivot tables, but with all the explaining, I was a bit slower than it takes to make a cup of coffee because I was explaining a lot. Before I sign off, let's summarize the benefit of pivot table. Pivot table help you get answer from your data without you having to write complex formulas. It's very fast to create a pivot table and it's really easy to use one. It helps you find relationship between your data and you can also visualize these report with a pivot chart. Alright, so here is how to create a pivot chart. It's so simple. I have the sales data and I want to create a pivot chart to showcase my sales according to months and let's say country names because my manager wants to see insight into this data. To create a pivot chart, first of all, I would recommend you convert your data into an Excel table. Select your data, press Ctrl plus T and click OK. The table is here. Now go to Insert and here you see the option that says Pivot Chart. Click on it and here they ask you if this is the table you want to create a pivot chart. Press OK And now we are on a brand new worksheet and we have our pivot chart. On the right hand side, we have all the fields. If I want to see the sum of sales, I'll drag sales into the value section and now our pivot chart has started to be created. Let's put months into this category. And now my manager can see the sum of sales according to months. But she said she wants to see the sales according to countries as well. So I'll drag the country and put it here. Now, my pivot chart is ready to show to my manager. The if function is the most important logical function in Excel. The if function is used to test for a condition and return one value if the condition is true and another value if the condition is false. To make it easier for you, let's look at a simple example. Here we have a table of data that consists of fruits and quantity columns. Let's use the if function to return a value of yes if the quantity is less than 10. To get started, let's begin by entering the if command. The if function takes three parameters, and the last parameter is optional. The first parameter is the condition or value to test. In our example, we want to test to see if the value in cell B2 is less than 10, so we will enter B2 is less than 10 as the condition to test for. The second parameter we must enter is the value to return if the condition is true. In this example, we will enter the value yes. This means that if the value in cell 2 is less than 10, the if function will return yes. The third parameter is optional. If provided, it contains the value that will be returned if the condition evaluates to false. To highlight a common mistake, we will not add this parameter in our example. Now that we have entered all of the if function's parameters, let's complete the command to examine the results. You can now see the value yes appear in the cell. Since cell B2 contains the value of 9, which is less than 10, the if function will return yes. Now let's drag our formula into cell D2 to D8. Notice that in cell D4, D6 and D7, the value false appear. Since we didn't specify a third parameter in our formula, the if function will return false when the condition evaluates to false. Many make the mistake of assuming that by leaving out the third parameter, the if function will return a blank result when the condition is false. To avoid unexpected results, it's a good idea to always enter the third parameter. So let's rewrite our formula to return a blank value when the condition evaluates to false. In cell E2, we will enter our if command and again use B2 is less than 10 for the first parameter and yes for the second parameter. This time, however, we will enter two quotation marks as a third parameter. This represent a blank value or empty string. Now let's complete the command and drag our formula down. This time, we can see that instead of returning false for these rows, the if function has returned a blank cell. So when you write your if function, remember to include both the value to return when the condition is true as well as the value to return when the condition is false. This video is all about the Excel format painter. We will look at the basic and beyond. So here I have a spreadsheet that has some formatting problems. As you can see, we have a mixture of text formats, different colors, and different font types. And problem like this often will come up when you are copying and pasting from one document to another or from an online source and into your document, etc. So how can I go about fixing this? Of course, I could select one of the problem area and manually change the font size, maybe change the font type if I need to, but that's going to take forever. So this is where the format painter comes in. What I can do is I can just decide what is a good example of the kind of text formatting that I want in my spreadsheet. So for example, this first fruit's name, that's good formatting I think for this document. So I just select that cell, that is a good example of the formatting I want. Then on the home tab, home ribbon here in the clipboard group, I can just click on this paint brush. That's the format painter. Once I have done that, whatever I click on next will be formatted just like that cell. So I'm going to choose this one here. I clicked and it has changed the formatting for that cell to match the formatting here for Apple. Now, one of the nice things about the format painter is that you don't have to do it one cell at a time. So this time I'm just going to choose cell D3 and I'll click the format painter. And then I'll click and drag to highlight the range that has all of the problems and then I'll release the mouse button. Notice that everything now has been formatted in a similar way to the cell that I had selected. There's a couple of potential issues here, right? You probably notice that these dates have been converted into just numbers like they are in column D. But I can fix that. I can click on one of these other higher dates and click the format painter and then click and drag down the spreadsheet, and now those are restored to being dates. Okay, the other problem I see is that this border. When I click and drag all of this data down to the spreadsheet, it removed the border on the left and the right and also at the bottom of my data. Again, that's easy to fix. I can just click here, for example, on cell B4, click the format painter button and then click and drag on the data that I want to restore that border to. And then I could do the same thing on the right side as well. And it's that simple. And of course, I could just use the border button to add that again. Also, let's look now at a couple of the advanced feature of the Excel format painter. As you can see, this name heading is bolded, but the other headings are not. And let's say I want to apply a background color to that cell, and maybe I want to change the font color to be white. How could I quickly make those changes on these other cells? Again, I would select the cell that has the formatting that I want to copy. Then I would click on the format painter and I could click and drag here to highlight that entire header row. But another way to do the same thing would be, instead of clicking once, double clicking. So if I double click on that format painter, now I can click. If I want to, I can release the mouse button, click again, and I could even just keep clicking and add that formatting to the rest of my spreadsheet. That doesn't make sense in this case. I could even do the same thing on another spreadsheet as long as I have clicked on the cell that has the formatting I want. And I double click on that format painter and it's still selected. I can click on sheet 2. Notice that it's still selected here. And then I could click and drag and just continue adding that same formatting where I want to be. When I am done with the format painter, I can tap escape on the keyboard or I can double click on it again. Either way, it will remove the format painter from my mouse pointer. You can use the autofill function to fill in a series of data automatically in a very convenient way, and it can save you a lot of time. If you need to populate a table with data series, the autofill function in Excel is an invaluable help. You can use this feature with any data, particularly numbers, which are most commonly used to create a series. Let's say we want to create a series of number from 1 to, let's say, 13 here. To do that, follow these steps. Type in number 1, then number 2 right below, so that Excel can identify the pattern for the series we want to create. Select these two cells and drag the bottom right hand corner of the selected area down. This way you can create as long a series as you need. The most common problem you may experience is that you fill in only one number. For example, if you write only number 1 and when you drag the corner of the cell, Excel will not create a series but only copy the number 1 to all cells you select. But it's never too late to fix this. If you want to turn this column of ones into a number of series, you don't need to delete anything. Simply roll out the autofill options menu down here in the bottom right hand corner and use it to swap the option from copy cells to fill series, which will change the column of ones into a number series. Beside these two options, there are also other items, but don't worry about this right now. We are focusing here on a number series. So we will select fill series. The selected cells in the column will populate with the desired values. Such series can be created vertically as well as horizontally. But that's still not everything Excel can do with autofill. You can create all the types of series you need. For example, if we want to use the series of even number only, we can type in 2 and 4 to start the series and then we can autofill the rest. But that's not all. You can create the series of month name in full or their short versions, days of week, dates, and you can write anything and make it a series like number 1 and drag it down, let's say quarter 1 and drag it, or anything with a pattern. So what do you think? What will be the series for which you will use autofill next time you are working in Excel? Share your ideas in the comment section below and let's know what other series could be created with the autofill function. In this video, I'll show you some date functions and formulas in Microsoft Excel, and I can say that you will find those super helpful. In this first example, I would like to just quickly show you how to find the number of days or years between one date and a second date. So here we have an employee data tracker. It shows a list of employees and the date that they began as an employee of this company. Let's say the company's 21st anniversary is coming up, and for that anniversary, I would like to know and be able to celebrate how long each employee has been an employee for the company. To do this is pretty simple. All I have to do is click, in this case in cell F3, type equals, and then I'm just going to click on the anniversary date, and then I'll type minus, and then I'll click the beginning date for this employee. Then I'll just tap enter on the keyboard, and that is the number of days between the beginning date and the end date, or the anniversary that we are going to be celebrating. Now the number of days may or may not be useful. So I'm going to click again on F3, and I'll go up here to the formula bar, and I'm going to put these parentheses and then divide it by 365. Tap enter on the keyboard, and that tells me how many years James has been an employee. I can just double click on the green square in the lower right corner of the cell, and it will copy that formula down this spreadsheet so that I can quickly know how long each employee has been an employee of the company. Now there are other ways to do the same thing. I didn't have to include the anniversary here in the spreadsheet. For example, but the key takeaway from this first example should be that you can subtract one date from another date to get the number of days between them, and then just divide by 12, divide it by 365, or whatever you want to do to find out how many years or months or date they have been your employees. Next, let's look at how I could use some date related function to pull out information from this date column here in C. So let's first get the day. I'm just going to start by typing equals, and then I'll type day. And then I'm just going to click on the date that I'm trying to pull the day out of. So C3, tap enter on the keyboard, and I have pulled out just the day number out of this date. I can click on the cell, double click on the green square, and it copies down the sheet. Let's try pulling out the month. I'll just tap equals, I'll type month, left parenthesis, and click on the date in question. I should put it in a right parenthesis, but I don't have to. I will just tap enter, and it pulls out the number 4. Just double click on the green square and it copies down the spreadsheet. Let's try year. I bet you can guess what is this. Equals year, left parenthesis, click on the date, tap enter, and then I click on the cell, double click on the green square, and it's done. Alright, so now what if you don't want to pull out the number of the day of the month or of the year, but rather you want to pull out the text version of the date? Let's try that. Here in I3, I just click and I'll type equals, and then I'll type the word text. Left parenthesis, I'll click the date in question, and then I'll put in a comma and in quotation marks. I am going to put 4 Ds representing day. I need to close the quote, tap enter, and Excel has pulled out the day as Tuesday. Now think about how cool is that. Excel knows that the 2nd April 2019 was a Tuesday, and it was able to extract that data out of this date because I used this formula. I'm going to double click on the green square to copy that information down the page. Let's do the same thing, but this time with month. So I type equals text, left parenthesis, and I'll click on the date in question. Put a comma in quotation marks. Instead of 4 Ds, I put 4 M's, close quote, right parenthesis, tap enter, and I have extracted the word April from this date. I'll double click on the green square to copy it down the spreadsheet. And now let's do year. Equals text, left parenthesis, click on the date, put quotation marks, 4 Y's for year, close quote, right parenthesis, tap enter, and then I can click on the cell, double click on the green square, which is the fill handle or autofill handle, and it copies the data down. So this is a really neat way to work with dates in Excel, and it's fun to think that all of this data is embedded just in the simple date here. And each of these pieces of information can be extracted from it using the formula and function that I have shared with you. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video to be helpful. If you did, please like, follow, subscribe, and when you do, click the bell so you will be notified when I post another video. Thanks for watching again.